Talk us through the timeline as to how we actually got here today, Tommy.
It's amazing how quickly we've got here, Kath. So 26 days ago, it was revealed that Sam Mitchell had said no to Collingwood to be their senior coach next year. That moved pretty quick. The following day, the club announced a succession plan in a hastily convened media conference. Jeff Kennett pointed to journalists around the room and said, you can have one question each. It wasn't a traditional press conference. Alistair Clarkson was gutted after getting that news that he wouldn't be coaching beyond next year, but he did accept it and he was happy to move forward with it. Then reports emerged that not all was well behind the scenes. Clarkson, Mitchell, Kennett, they all rubbish these reports several times. They all said they were wrong and that Hawthorn was a family club. They were unified. There was conjecture over a mediation session. Then 7 days ago, Kath, Clarkson delivered a 13-minute address at his weekly press conference. He didn't take any questions. He put a flag in the ground, or so he thought. He alluded to his family tragedies, to emphasise the point that he would be here next year because loyalty and integrity is so important to him. But then earlier this week is my understanding, there was a shift in Clarkson's thinking. He came to the belief or came to the understanding that this succession plan would not work next year. Now, the players certainly felt it wouldn't work as well. Ben McAvoy, the captain of the club, an old school type leader, he didn't want Clarkson to go at all. But many other senior players and officials at this football club thought that the succession plan was doomed before it started. And that's exactly how it turned out today. The club said that this was mutual. Look, I disagree with that because Clarkson was filthy about being sacked. He called Hawthorn's bluff, and then the Hawks had no choice but to let him go and pay him out for it as well. So they can call it mutual all they want. Clarkson's orchestrated this and done it beautifully, and it means Sam Mitchell and Hawthorn have free air next year. But what it also means is that Clarkson's reputation stays intact. You can't quite say the same about the club.
Yeah, well, as you say, a lot of what we can draw from this is that it just seems that there's so much division within the club. What does this say then about the club's leadership as it stands?
Yeah, well, I've spoken about Jeff Kennett, Kath, at length, but Justin Reeves, the CEO, who's hardly fronted the media at all over the past 2 or 3 months, he's played a pivotal role in this. I'll explain why. So Justin Reeves and Jeff Kennett, I'm told, have had an ordinary to very poor relationship for the best part of 9 to 12 months. They've hardly spoken since Christmas. They are not on good terms at all. If you think there's a rift between Sam Mitchell and Alistair Clarkson, there's probably not, but that's nothing compared to the CEO and coach. And that became untenable, according to people in the club, in the last couple of months. So Justin Reeves recently signed a 5-year contract extension as the CEO of the club to the end of 2026. So Alistair Clarkson, he's being told by Justin Reeves and Jeff Kennett and the board that he's to step away at the end of 2022, while a CEO who he doesn't get along with gets 5 more years. That didn't sit well with Alistair Clarkson. Rob McCartney, the head of football at Hawthorn Footy Club, he's been a mediator. He's been sort of the conduit between the two parties. He's had a difficult job, and no matter how capable he is, and I'm told he's a very capable operator, he cannot do the job that Chris Fagan did before he went to Brisbane. Now, Chris Fagan is an experienced football person, and he pulled Clarko in the right direction. He was a shoulder to lean on. He was a stern, 2IC to Alistair Clarkson. He went to the Lions, and people at Hawthorn tell me it hasn't been the same ever since. Then the board. Now, we told you 3 weeks ago in AFL Tonight and on the couch, Kath, they wanted Clarkson out now, and they were hoping he'd leave for another job. In the end, Clarkson called the club's bluff, and he leaves anyway. But there were certainly board members that were happy to roll out the red carpet. They felt they needed change. They didn't think they could sack him. In the end, they all sort of get what they want, but it's been very messy on the way through.
Yeah, well, as you say, the upshot of all this is that the change has occurred, and Sam Mitchell does have that clear air that we are all talking about ad infinitum at the moment. Do you think that he is ready to lead outright, though?
Well, everyone tells me he's an extremely good coach, tactically, strategically. I wouldn't know how good he is on game day like any other punter in the street. But from a leadership perspective, from someone that's been through the AFL system, he's done it the hard way. He's coached his own VFL team now as well. You'd have to suggest that he's as ready as he'll ever be. I mean, there was talk that being under Alistair Clarkson next year would have really aided him. I think that was just spin from Hawthorn. The reality is that Sam Mitchell will be better off for Alistair Clarkson not being there next year. And if that wasn't the case, Clarkson would still be there. So I think it does benefit Mitchell that Clarkson's not there. And by round 1 next year, we're not thinking about Alistair Clarkson. We're thinking about Sam Mitchell as the senior coach. He's still going to need people around him. Chris Newman is a close confidant of Sam Mitchell. He's out Hawthorn. He's out of contract. Don't be surprised, even if Richmond or another club goes after Chris Newman, Sam Mitchell wants to re-sign him and keep him because he's such a close friend and a 2IC. He's got a job ahead of him, but I think without Clarkson looming in the shadows, and Clarkson said this afternoon, it'll be an easier job for him, but not an easy job.
Yeah, well, a lot of moving parts at Hawthorn, and more broadly so as well, that coaching merry-go-round, if it wasn't already starting to turn, today's developments certainly have it, or would almost have it in full swing now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just accelerated even further by about probably 200 or 300%. It's quite incredible the way this has worked over the last 3 months. Who would have thought that Nathan Buckley, sacked two months ago, would be joining Alistair Clarkson on the, and I use this in the most polite way possible, the scrap heap after the season. Now, Nathan Buckley is a highly sought after person. We know that. Alistair Clarkson could walk into just about any club that he wants. But there's a few clubs that will have nervous coaches at the end of next year if Alistair Clarkson isn't coaching in 2022. The Gold Coast Suns, I've got no doubt that the AFL privately would love Alistair Clarkson to grow the game at the Gold Coast Suns. Stuart Dew's out of contract at the end of 2022. Brett Ratton, imagine that. Brett Ratton leaves. Alistair Clarkson comes to the Saints at the end of next year. Again, it would be harsh on Ratton at the moment, but another bad year, you never know. Adelaide, you think Matthew Nicks is doing a good job? Alistair Clarkson, Matthew Nicks. It's pretty much a no-brainer, I would have thought. Same with Justin Longmuir, doing a good job. But Alistair Clarkson comes along. The Freo board would have to at least talk about it. And then David Teague. Well, that's the main one. David Teague has to be in some sort of trouble now. There's a review that's been completed. It's been presented to senior management at the club. Hasn't been presented to the board yet. We expect that to happen in the next sort of 7 to 10 days. There'll be some nervous coaches around the league. Even if Alistair Clarkson has a year off next year, he'll be ready to go the year after. I think there's some unfinished business for Alistair Clarkson. I think he would appreciate that. I think clubs will be after his services, and certainly every football club board in the league, maybe apart from the Sydney Swans or even Geelong, even though Chris Scott's out of contract at the end of next year, they'll be thinking, are we better off with Alistair Clarkson? And I think in most cases the answer will be yes, and that's danger for those senior coaches.
Yeah, it's all part of the theatre of it all, isn't it? Tom Morris, great work on this one. You've tracked it from start to finish, and happy birthday as well. What a day to spend it.
Thanks, Kath. Great day of footy.